Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Best of Knowledge Days 2020, the fourth session in our series. And this session is Managing Electronic Resources, the Advanced Topics. I am Kevin Lane-Cummings, a Senior Training and Consulting Partner with Ex Libris and ProQuest. I'm part of the Global Knowledge Delivery Team, which is the training team and the documentation team and the translation team, and just really thrilled at how many folks have come to join us today for this session. I should probably point out right away when if you saw this signups for this, or if you're seeing this now and it's the advanced topics and you may be wondering, where's the basic session? Where's the basic topics? When we had to move online for this this series of knowledge days, that was one of the sessions that we had to cut that would have been presented. I would have been presenting in Los Angeles for knowledge days. Part of the reason we felt we were willing to cut it was because some of that basic material is already available in training sessions on the Ex Libris Knowledge Center, which I will show you a link to later in this session. If you are really new to electronic resources, managing them using Alma, some of these subjects that we're going to talk about today might be outside of what you're ready to do, but hopefully it'll be a nice kind of teaser, a nice preparation to show you some of the things that can be done. And for those of you who have some experience doing electronic resource management, well, here's the next step. This is the kind of stuff we'll be working on, that you will have a chance to work on going forward in Alma. A quick introduction to myself. I am Kevin Lane-Cummings. I have been with ProQuest, Ex Libris. In fact, I started with Serial Solutions, if any of you are familiar with that company, which was wrapped into ProQuest some years ago. I've been with it for about 11 years. I started as a technical writer doing documentation for the Serial Solutions products, and now I've been training on Ex Libris products for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm starting to lose track. But one of my favorite things to do has been going to knowledge days and teaching folks and demonstrating some of the stuff, especially with Alma, and then some of the 360 services products. On the line with me, in addition to Ray, who was introducing us at the very beginning, part of the knowledge delivery team, we have Carolyn Sprague, who used to be one of the trainers and is now with the implementation team. Some of you may have actually worked with her. So because there are several of us on the line, again, if you have questions during this session, I would really appreciate if you would type them into the chat. Of course, you can't speak them out loud because you're all muted. But when you send them in the chat, please address them to all panelists. That way, in addition to myself, Carolyn and Ray will see them and they can catch me if I miss the question. And we can make sure to address as many as we can. We won't be able to address all of them, I suspect, because I'm hopeful that this will encourage you to have a lot of questions and think a lot about this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, with only 1 hour and time is going fast, we will need to probably get back to you at a later time to answer all the questions that might come up. But nonetheless, put them in there and we'll do our best at this time and later to get them answered. What will we be talking about? In general, we're going to talk about some kind of interesting things that are just steps beyond the basics, such as managing trials, creating electronic inventory using import profiles, and so forth. So we hope that will give you even more ways to leverage Alma's workflows and options. My expectation is that who is here is electronic service librarians, acquisition staff, trial operators, and managers. Some of you may be, again, maybe new to electronic resource management. Some of you may be old hands, but this is the kind of people that the content of this session will be most appropriate for. And here is our overall agenda. It's kind of a mixture of individual workflows, processes, tools to help you manage e-resources. They don't necessarily connect with each other. I don't have like a big theme to kind of address through this entire session. Instead, we're just going to hit some key things like starting and managing a trial. If you have been given a trial by an electronic resource provider, what do you have to do to set that up and then manage it? And then how do you manage e-resources using import profiles? If you need to bring in some bibliographic records from some other source and you need to import them, how can you use import profiles for that? Some ongoing management techniques, just some small things. In this case, we're just going to say, what if you need to deactivate an e-resource? Excuse me. Hopefully you would have learned how to activate and acquire and set up and order e-resources. That would be considered a basic e-resource management technique. But if you need to then deactivate it or even delete an e-resource, small things, but you may need to run into that sometime, and you may not realize just how easy it is to do that, and I will show you. And then some configuration options. That's even more of a kind of a variety of things, such as how do you figure out if there's some of your electronic resources that are not being displayed to your patrons in the discovery service, and why that might happen, and some quick ways to find those resources that are missing and get them in front of your patrons in discovery services. Another thing we're going to cover in the configuration options will be, how do you make sure that certain e-resources are only available to a select group of people, like a select campus, a certain campus at your institution, or even an individual library. If you want it to be so that patrons visiting a certain library, once we can go back and visit those libraries, how do you set it up so that they can only access the e-resource when they're sitting in that library? Another thing we'll talk about in configuration options is conducting overlap analysis, so that you see, am I getting the same materials from 2, 3, 4 different providers? And do I really need to pay for all of those? And how can I find out who has what? And then finally do some community zone updates, how to review what happens when our materials have been updated by the community zone updates. The last thing I'll talk about in the overall agenda, the wrap up, it's just a quick summary of what we've been doing and some links to provide further information. This is only an hour, even less than that now that I've been talking and introducing this, but there is so much more information out there for you folks to be made available, mostly in our documentation. There is other training materials, and I want to point you to those since I can't do it all during this session. Again, with questions, toss them into the chat, send to all panelists, and we'll get started that way. So our first subject area, starting and managing trials. I have two general things I'm going to talk about. First, kind of the overall general workflow. How does one do this? And then I'm going to go over into Alma itself and set up a trial so you can see it. So here's the general flow of a trial. And you'll also hear the name evaluation. Same concept. It's when you have been given the opportunity to try out an e-resource of some kind, a collection or a portfolio that you are not ready to pay for, but the providers want to give you the option to try it out. When you have that, the first thing you must do is create a purchase order line, but don't order it yet. And I'll show you what I mean in Alma. It must be in review. The purchase order line must be in review right now for a trial to work. Then you go into the trial details page, and I'll show you that, where you need to have an advance. You want to have this in your mind already before you go into that page in Alma. What are the start and end dates of the trial? What are the questions you want to have on a survey of whoever you're asking about? Is this a good resource for us to purchase or not? Who will be the participants in the surveys? Who do you want to actually fill out the surveys? Is it other staff in your institution's libraries, or is it faculty of a certain department who you want to review the trial? And then finally, is this material, is this e-resource going to be made available to everyone for this trial period? In your discovery service, everyone can see it, or is it a private trial and only those participants who you select, you intentionally hand select, will get to even find the material at all? So know what those are before you get started on the process. And then you will activate the service, but you won't make it available. The difference being, an activated service is going to be accessible from people at your institution through their IP address as they've logged into your system, but making it available, or in this case, not making it available, means that it won't be in your discovery service so that everybody can find it, even if they're not participating in the trial. All right, and finally, after the trial ends, you're going to analyze the results of your survey. All right, so this next slide here, is kind of the steps that I'm going to go through. I'm not going to leave this up on the screen because I have to switch over to Alma, but I put this in the PowerPoint so that if you're reading through the PowerPoint later, you'll see the steps that I'm using to create this trial. So I'm not going to hang around on this page. Instead, I'm going to Alt-Tab over to Alma and clean up the page a little bit here so that it's not quite so messy. So hopefully y'all can see this. I tried to zoom in a little bit on this page. I am in a kind of a test environment of Alma. It's actually a consortium environment. So those of you who actually are part of consortia, this will, you'll see some things that remind you of it. But what I need to do then is start my trial. And the way I started the trial was I needed to, as you recall, I needed to create a purchase order line. And I have already done that to kind of expedite things, because that's no different than you do with anything else. When you place an order for an electronic resource, you would get to the point of a PO line, a purchase order line, but then you would not place the order. And so where I could find that would be to review a purchase order line. And so I'm going to click on that in the acquisitions menu here to see my purchase order lines in review. If it had been ordered, it would have moved out of the review, of course. But in this case, I have this ProQuest Historical Newspapers Newsday collection that I have created a purchase order line, but I did not order it. I just saved the purchase order line until now. And I have a couple options right here on what I could do. If I look over on my my actions over here on the side, I could edit this. I could order it now. No, I don't want to do that. And the more actions here, look at this. I have start a trial or request an evaluation. So if I am a person who has the role of trial manager or trial operator, then this link will exist and I could start a trial right from here. But if I was not a trial manager or a trial operator, if I did not have that role in Alma, I wouldn't have the start a trial. I could request an evaluation, and this order, this purchase order line for this collection would get sent to the folks who could start a trial. I'm actually not going to do either of those right now. I'm going to go back to edit this purchase order line just so you could see what it would look like if I had come here from placing this order, or excuse me, from creating this purchase order line. So I have already filled out a whole bunch of things on here. The licensee is ProQuest, and ProQuest is Ultimate Material Supplier, and so forth. Everything else on this purchase order line of this collection that I'm going to be working on. And when I created this yesterday, I just clicked save. And that's why it got tucked away in the purchase order line review page. But now I'm ready to do the next thing. And so maybe you came to this page because you were creating this purchase order line. And look up here at the top, we've got save and request evaluation. So this is how I would request a trial if I was not able to start it. If I look under this menu though, I do in fact have save and start trial. So that's what I'm going to do. Whichever way I get to the starting the trial doesn't matter, but I've got this purchase order line of a material that has not been ordered yet, and I'm going to start the trial. And the page that's going to pop up is my trial details page. Again, telling me which collection I'm working on and what are the required fields here. It's the start date. I actually have to put what is the start date. So I'm going to say we're starting it today. And the end date, well, the material provider told me that we could take a look at it until the end of July. So I put that date in there. This field, remind participants before the trial ends. Yeah, I want to give them a reminder 10 days before that I really want their comments. Is this available to the public or not? It is not, so I'm not going to check that box. And I'm done with this page, so I'm going to save this page right now in the upper right corner. And this will bring us to the next page of managing trials. Look here, we are managing trials, and it looks like we've got 30 different trials going on here on our pretend Alma facility here. And now I need to find the one that I was working on. So you'll notice that I have quite a few different trials going on, and they're in various different statuses. So I've got some that have been requested. In other words, this was a person who could not kick off a trial. They could only request a trial. Here's some that are in draft. They're being worked on. And down below, I've got some trials that have already closed and they're done. But of course, I want mine. And it's this one right here, ProQuest Historical Newspapers. It's connected with that purchase order line. And I am going to now edit this trial that I've been working on. You'll see that there's more fields here on this page, on this trial details page, now that we've got it going. When we do the analysis, the results will come in here. I'm not quite ready for that because I haven't even set up my survey. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch to the survey form, and we'll see that we have a couple places down here to add questions and some general information. So I'm just going to add from a list of questions. I could create a question right on the spot, but we also have a list of questions that were created a long time ago for all of our surveys for these trials. And you can see, for instance, should we buy this? Nice simple question. Do we need this? How easy is it to use? I'm just going to add those 3 questions to my survey, and they should pop in here on this page. And I can decide this one is mandatory, this first question. I really need my participants to tell me, is this a mandatory, is this something we should buy or not? All right, then I'm going to move on to the next tab, which is participants. I told you that I could select who gets the survey, who do I want to notify. I could create a set of participants, of users in Alma that I want to have available to be my participants, or I could just add participants one by one. For the sake of keeping things fast here in this session, I'm just going to really quickly pick me, and I'm going to add myself as the one participant. But of course, you would add a bunch of participants, whoever you want to. Again, creating a set in advance would certainly make it much easier right here to just add a set of participants. And the analysis is not going to be ready for me until I get going. Any other alerts, I'll do a quick look at that. Looks like there's some things that I need to check about this. The resource is not activated. That's true. That's the next thing we're going to do. And we're just going to save this trial information as quickly as we can. Okay, now let's go back down here. Our trial is getting started right here. And the last thing I need to do is activate this material. In other words, make sure it's available to the participants that I have indicated so that we can click on a link and go see this new electronic resource that we're trialing. So I'm going to click on activate. And yes, I really do want to do this. And I want to confirm the activation. And here I can do things like make sure that there's anything else about this. I'm in the electronic collections editor now. This is not part of the trial. This is part of just the resource itself getting activated. I'm just going to take a look at a couple of these things, make sure that I've got the way we want this set up, and then I'm going to click save, and that should take care of it. All right, it's successfully updated, and you'll notice that back on my review page, the purchase order line is not in review anymore because it's already been moved on to the trial. That's it. Later, if I want to go back and take a look at it, especially if I would need to look at the analysis, I'm going to click on the acquisitions menu and manage trials, and I'll go back to that manage trials page, and I'll be able to edit this trial and look at the analysis. Now, there won't be anything in there now because the questions haven't been looked at by any of my participants, but this is where it would be, and I could see what the participants have said. So that's what I wanted to show you about trials. As I mentioned, if you have questions about this, I did move quickly through it, I admit, and I couldn't show you everything about it, but I do need to move on to the next subject. So if you have questions that we could answer later, throw them into the chat. Thanks. I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint presentation and move on to the next subject area, managing e-resources using import profiles. In this case, we're going to be again, I'm going to give you a general workflow, just really briefly how this is done, and then we're going to quickly set up and run an import profile. So the process goes through in the acquisitions menu, managing the import profiles. Then we need to create a new order and update the inventory or do the repository. And then we're going to create a new import profile, which will be a repository that includes electronic inventory. And that was a quick switch. And so this is the steps that I'm going to take. Again, I'm just going to really do it live in Alma instead, but you'll be able to do this later. I will tell you this, import profiles is such a sophisticated, powerful tool in Alma that I could spend several hours showing how to do this, all the details. I don't have that. I got to do it in about 15 minutes. But I wanted you to get a taste of it, just a sense of the kind of things that you are able to do so that you could at least try it out. But mostly I'm going to encourage you, especially on this subject, on import profiles, to use the documentation to step through how to do this, because it gets in much more detail than I can. It explains every field on these pages that are going to be here. All right. If I'm going to start here on the home page, I have to pull up my other sheets of paper here. We're going to start with, I had to create a collection where I'm going to put all these materials. Just to give you an imaginary scenario, perhaps we recently acquired Alma, we migrated all of our materials into Alma, but there were some electronic resources from our old system that got placed into Alma but accidentally placed as print materials. So what I could do is then export those materials in a file from the print side and then import them as an e-resource. That's just one example. There are many others of reasons you might have materials that need to be imported from a file or from something like that. So I needed to create a collection that would hold them. So I'm going to actually find that collection really quickly just to show you how I did it, and I actually called it Knowledge Days just to make it easier for me to find. It looks like I'm searching in the community zone. Well, that's not where I'm going to find a collection of my own, so I put it in the institution zone. And here it is. I have this package. It doesn't actually have anything in it right now. There's no portfolios or anything in it. It hasn't been activated or anything. It's just ready. I need it ready in advance to take what I'm about to import. And the way that I'm going to import it is from using the import profile. So up here in the acquisitions menu, I go down to the import section and I have manage import profiles. There are dozens of import profiles that have been created. Some are built into Alma and many more were created by my coworkers who have built import profiles into this kind of temporary imaginary sandbox for Alma. I want to quick find the one that I made. I'm trying to remember if I called it mine or Knowledge Days. Yes, Knowledge Days import profile. So I already created one because it would take so long to actually, but I will nonetheless, I will show it to you. I will go in. I could just as well have added a new profile, and if I had more time, I would do that so you could see the steps. I think it will make sense if I just show you some of the pages that I worked on and show you some of the key fields that are really helpful to make sure that you cover. For instance, here on this first tab, the profiles details page, in addition to the name and a description that would help my fellow staff members know what it was about, I had to pick the originating system. Where did this come from? Where did this material originally come from that I'm about to import? Another key field here is which protocol are we using? And the choices here were, are we doing an FTP from some other server site or OAI? In this case, I actually have the files in hand that I downloaded from Alma that I'm going to upload. And I need to set that up in advance to say that this is an upload file kind of protocol. It'll be coming in as XML and it'll be marked 21. This is an active profile. If I were not ready for anyone else to use it, if I'm still developing it, I might set it inactive. And the target format is also marked 21 with a graphic. I can't even edit that because it's coming in that way. All right, let's go to the next tab, normalization and validation. So when this information, these bibliographic records are brought in with this import profile, I need to tell Alma what to do with it. For instance, should I do any filtering of what's coming in? For example, if there's some records that I do not want to come in, I might have to filter out the data if it's a huge file of some kind, and you can see the different possibilities of ways I can filter it out. Retrieve all records which contain a 77X field, things like that. There's many different ones. Right now I'm just going to take the whole thing, so I don't need to filter anything out, but that is an option there. For normalization, And what kind of corrections do we need to make to the data? Again, knowing what kind of material is in there and what I want to have, I might choose to do some kind of adding fields or deleting fields as they come in. And then handle the data using markxml-bib import, or I could also use markxml-bib metadata editing on save. Moving along to the match profile section. The purpose of the match profile is to check what I'm importing to see if we already have it. If it's already in our system, obviously we don't want to bring in a new bibliographic record and add to the confusion with duplicate records. So I have a couple of fields I need to turn on or off depending on how I'm going to do any of kind of this matching to see the new stuff that's coming in. Right away, I could choose, am I going to do different matching based on whether it's a serial or a non-serial? In this case, I want the serials to match, both serials and non-serials to match by this thing, this particular 001 field, but I could choose something different for the non-serials. Or if I'm not going to be importing or don't want to care about the difference between serial and non-serial, I would just turn that off and let it import the same way for both. How does it check for the matches then? What kind of action should it do? Should it handle it automatically? If it finds some match between what's being imported and what's already in Alma, do I want it to handle it automatically? In which case, what I'm about to fill out is important. Or should I switch it to manual and anytime it finds a match, it alerts me that it's found a match and it won't mess with it? Whatever your workflow is at your institution, how you want to handle it, however big this file is, maybe that will influence it. And so if so, in this case, for instance, upon a match, I do not want to import. That was my choice. So the automatic system will take care of that. Again, whatever you want to do, you could merge it, you could overlay it, or you could just import it as a brand new record. Depends on what the kind of material is. You can see I'm kind of waving my hands here in the sense of I can't describe every single thing we're doing here, but I want to show you some of the kinds of things you're going to want to think about before you're importing them. In the merge overlay section, do we lay, if we're going to be doing any overlaying, I'm choosing to not import, but this would be important for an overlay. Which fields are overlaid? Which should we allow the bibliographic record to be deleted? Do we not override it with a lower brief version and so forth? Sometimes there are community zone records that match what we're pulling in, and we might want to connect that to somehow. Do we want to handle it? Do we update the community zone record with some local extensions or skip the record or anything like that? And the rest of these I'm going to have to pass on, but they're all could be very important depending on what you're importing. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top because I need to keep moving to Management Tags tab. So we could add management tags to these records if we wanted to, or we could suppress the records. For instance, we could suppress it from publishing or delivery. For instance, if we normally synchronize with OCLC, but we don't want to do that with this batch, that's, for instance, this would be the way to protect that. Here's the OCLC one, sorry. If we want to synchronize with Libraries Australia, if that's something else that you do, or not. And then the last tab over here is inventory information. And I could choose right away what kind of operations we're going to be doing. Is this an electronic material only, or is it mixed electronic and physical? Whatever. So we're going to leave that at none for now and save this. All right. So now I'm going to look at this import profile. I've got it set up the way I want it. It's stored in the import profile system. I'm ready to make a run at it, to give it a shot, to get my stuff. So over here, you'll see on the row actions list, I have run. Click on run, and we need to add a file. If you recall, there were a couple different ways of bringing in the material. I could use an FTP server or an OAI, but I chose to select file import because, in fact, that's what I have. I have a file of bibliographic material. So now I need to navigate to that file, and I'll pull it up over here, grab it off my desktop, and you'll see it automatically appear. I can give it a label just to remind me what this is. I think I might have just lost it. Let me try that again. There it is. And add the file. So it'll import this. In this case, apparently I made some minor difference in the way my file material was set up, but at this point it would say, if I did it right, it would say ready to go, and it would launch it. And now it's a job. So if I went to my admin tools and monitored the job, that's the way I would see when it got done. I'm sorry that I can't show it to you because I apparently I clicked on one of those settings that makes it not understand what the file is that's coming in there. But at this point, it's just kind of a matter of getting it done. The running is kind of the, the after the end of it. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the kind of things that an import profile can do for you. Because I am not a cataloger, I don't know all the ins and outs of all of those things. And again, I rely on the documentation when I'm working with these materials. And so I hope that you will now have some sense of what to look for when you go to the documentation to learn about import profiles. So I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint so that we can move on to the next section of discussion. Ongoing management, as I mentioned earlier, just a couple of things, pretty simple to do, but maybe interesting just because you never thought you would need to use it or that it was available. One of them is deactivating e-resources, and the other is deleting e-resources. And again, in here in the PowerPoint presentation, I've got a couple slides on how to do it. Here's the deactivate slide, and here is the delete resources slide. But I'm actually going to just show it to you. I'm going to switch to Alma and go back to the home page to demonstrate doing each of these. Let's take a look. Let's pretend that I have some collection. In fact, I'm going to do that collection that that knowledge ace collection that I was going to use for the import, because I don't actually need this this collection, so I'm going to delete it. And why might I do this? Well, it could be that I just don't, it was a mistake and I just added it and didn't need to. It could be that it was a trial, we never decided to use it, and we don't want it to clutter up our Alma system. That's just why I'm going to do it for you folks. Sometimes you do want to keep a collection even after you're no longer subscribing to it. So let's pretend that that's instead of, no, I will show you the delete first. Just because there's this knowledge base collection that I personally created and that I did not put anything in. It's probably pretty obvious at this point what to do. There's a delete button. If you don't see it on either of these buttons right here, it will be in the drop-down menu, and that's it. You can delete it from right here. But actually, what I wanted to show you a different one, because I want to deactivate a collection that has been activated. So I'm going to quick find this collection that I'm going to pretend that we've had this collection. We've been using it, made it available. We decided not to renew the subscription to it. We don't want to delete it. It's this Business Books Online. I don't want to delete this collection because I've got orders attached to it. I may have analytics attached to it that we may never use in the future. We don't know. I don't want to get rid of it. I just don't want it available to my patrons because we don't have the subscription to it anymore. So again, it's not all that hard to switch it off, to make it inaccessible to my patrons and to anyone without deleting it. It's over here on the more actions. I'm sorry, that's we have to edit the collection. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to go to the additional tab. This is just a little more buried in the system than that, than deleting an entire collection at once. I'm trying to make it deactivated. So now I go down to the services down at the bottom here, and we'll see that we have this service is full text. It's been activated, it has 2 portfolios in it, and I want to deactivate it. So I go to the row action, and there it is, the tool to deactivate this collection. And that really what we're doing is we're turning off the availability, the active part of the service so that it won't show up in our discovery service. People cannot activate it. Excuse me, people cannot link to it because in fact we do not have the subscription anymore, but everything else stays the same about this. You'll notice that this little symbol here, which is the community zone symbol, has switched to a black symbol instead of blue, meaning that it's not activated anymore. It's a quick glance way to know that it's not active. And I save this collection and we're done. So now I have it deactivated. Just as a comparison, you see this one down here, this Textbooks Online. The bibliographic records are linked with the community zone records, and this is activated in our Alma service, whereas this one is no longer activated. It's just part of the collection. It's, excuse me, part of our Alma institution zone, but it's not active for use. All right, going back to my PowerPoint presentation, and we'll talk about some of these configuration options. Again, this is just kind of a collection of some different tools that are available to you to dig into your electronic resources and make sure that things are working the way you want to. I'm going to start with the first two on the left side there, inactive services and inactive proxies. So when you add collections, add portfolios to Alma, and you make these e-resources available to your patrons, if you forget to activate them, they're not available. The patrons may even try to click on them and can't get them because they haven't been activated. Similarly, if you forget to turn on a proxy for a particular service, patrons won't be able to see it, won't be able to link to it when they click on a link. If they are proxied into your institution, for instance, right now, where very few people are coming into the libraries, I suspect that you want to make sure that all of your e-resources are proxied that need it, if that is how your institution works. If your patrons are proxying into the institution, you want to make sure that the e-resources are made available through those proxies. So we're going to find out if there's any services, or excuse me, any resources where they have not been activated or their proxies has not been activated. And so to do that, again, I have a couple slides here on checking for inactive services or checking for inactive proxy settings. You can look at these slides some other time if you look at the PowerPoint. Instead, I'm just going to demonstrate live in Alma how to find these services. So I'm going to first look for active collections that we have added to Alma in our institution zone, but never got the services activated so that they would show up as links in the discovery service and the links would work and so forth. To do this, it's actually pretty simple. We just have to use an advanced search. So I click on advanced search for my persistent search box up here. I make sure I'm looking at electronic collections in the institution zone. And what I'm looking for are the I'm going to look in the the electronic collection section down here, and I'm going to find availability. Is it available or not? And I want to find electronic collection availability equals not available to try to find the ones where it has not been switched on. Any collections in my institution zone where the availability is set for not available. And for the most part, these should be set for available, unless I have intentionally deactivated some collections. So I'm going to conduct that search, and we'll see which materials come up. Now, again, this is a kind of a test Alma, so there's going to be some interesting things going on here. For instance, here's that knowledge days collection that I just created. It's never been made available. The service says not available. But there are others here. Maybe we really wanted this ProQuest Central UK Ireland to be activated, and it's not. You can see it's the dark color instead of the blue color. This is an inactive or an unavailable collection. We should go turn that on. We should go activate it. I'm not going to do that now, but I would create an e-activation task and make sure that it gets done. So this is a quick way of finding all the different materials that have this flag, so to speak, have this status of being not available, and we can make sure that we turn on the ones that we really want it to be available. Because of an innocent mistake, whatever, the person who originally created the collection or turned it on didn't go through the final step of making it available, making the service available for our patrons. Similarly, if there is a proxy that hasn't been turned on for the materials, well, let's do a quick check for that. We use the same kind of thing. We can use this advanced search for an electronic collection in the institution zone where the proxy of the electronic collection, let's go down in the electronic collection section, we go to proxy enabled electronic collection. No, proxy enabled service. Is the service equal to no? Are there any electronic collections that the proxy didn't get turned on for the service? And we'll do that quick search. Now, it's certainly possible that there are some on this list that are supposed to be not turned on. If I had some open access resources, some free resources where our proxy should not be added to the URL, so there's no anybody can access it through our institution. You don't have to be logged into as an authenticated user. Then we actually do not want the proxy turned on. So that may be a legitimate reason to be on this list. But maybe this Spinoza collection really was supposed to be proxied, and anybody who's off campus now, which is pretty much everyone, cannot access this through the proxy. And so we would need to go into this and turn on the proxy in this service. Again, adding proxies is kind of a part of the basic acquisition process, acquisition workflows. And so I don't want to take the time to go through them right now, but that's what you would do from this list. You would use this list as a job list to start working on the anything that needs to be proxy activated. Okay, going back to the PowerPoint slides, we have a couple more configuration kinds of things down on the lower left, inventory management groups. I'm going to describe those a little bit, and then I'm going to show you how to give patron access based on those inventory management groups. So inventory management groups are a way of dividing up your institution into different groups so you can manage which of your various e-resources, your inventory, is available to each of these groups. In the real world, in the physical materials world, maybe you have a restricted building, a restricted library where only certain folks can go in. Well, in the e-resource world, we can do something like that equivalently so that only certain groups of people can access certain e-resources. Again, the kinds of things I think about that would be common for this is, for instance, the law materials where you're paying a lot of money for a select group of law e-resources, and you only want people in the law school to have access to it. Or health resources where you just can't afford to pay for such a large number of people seeing it. You only want people in the health institute at your institution to be able to access it. Whatever it is, you're going to create some different management groups, and I'll show you how that happens. In order for this to work, though, your libraries, your different libraries or your different campuses or whatever this kind of division, they need different IP ranges. So this is where you might need to communicate with your IT department to find out how are things organized and maybe request that things get changed so that you can do this division. This is the only way Alma can separate into groups, is by knowing which IP address a certain library or a certain campus is associated with, because that's how Alma will then divide up and make sure it's okay. So if you have, once you have that set up, then Alma itself must be configured for multi-campus inventory and management. And that's outside the scope of this session. It's something that you can look up in the documentation how that is done and contact our support team to help you with that. Once that is set up, you create management groups. And so I will show you how to do that. And I will also show you this part, which is configuring patron access. So now I'm going to switch back to my Alma and start working with these. So this is a kind of a high-level configuration process of making these management groups. So the only folks who can do this are repository administrators and general system administrators. So you have to have one of those roles to do what I'm about to show you. I'm going to go up to the Alma configuration. And since some of you watching this may not have these roles, you won't be able to go in and do this, but at least you'll know what to ask for and to have it work for you folks. So, so if you're a repository administrator or a general systems administrator, you go into here, and in the configuration menu, we'll go to the resources tab and go to the general section, and down here we find inventory network groups. And here is a list of groups that have already been set up in my test Alma environment here. Looks like we've got 12 different groups. We've got a health sciences group up at the top there. Looks like we've got down here, I don't know what SLSPG2 is, but fortunately the description is in there and it just says law. So I'm going to make up a group just for fun, just to show you how this group is created by using the add group here. I can call it whatever I want, but I do have to give it a name. So supergroup, and I'm going to call it, it's actually a combination of law and health. Don't know why those two groups would be together, but I just need something that I could show for you folks. All right, I've created the group. It only gave me two things I needed to add. The name and even the description was optional. But now that I've created it, a whole bunch of other fields open up when I use the row action and click edit. Namely, what I want to do is add members of this group. So I've created the name of the group, but I have to add members. And so I have campuses, if my institution is divided into campuses, again, with different IP ranges, I could add a different campus. And so for this, I'm going to put the SL1 campus in. That's my health library, I'm pretending. And I will click add campus for that. So it can appear up there. And then I have the law library that I want to add. Those two groups, those two, not groups, but institutions, those group parts of our institution are part of my supergroup. And then I save. And that's it. That's creating this management group. Well, that's all well and good, but I now have to tell Alma which materials can be made available just to this group that I created. So now I need to find some materials. I'm going to go back to Alma and I'm going to search for a collection called, it's one of my law collections, so Westlaw Law School. And it's the first one here. It's got quite a large list of portfolios, but this collection I do not want accessible to everyone. We're paid by by usage, and we don't want the entire school to have access to this. I need to restrict it to a particular management group. So how do I do that? I edit the collection right here on this link, actions, and all of this stuff is the same I would find on any other collection, but the one I want to show you here is group settings, this tab right here. There are no groups that's associated with. I'm going to add a group. And the group I want, you probably guess, is my supergroup. And do I need to enable a particular proxy? Maybe a different proxy than I use for all other situations. This would be the chance to do that. I'm actually going to use the one that's defaulted for the resource itself that's embedded into the resource. If I needed to give it its own proxy, for instance, if there was a separate proxy that we used for that special group, that supergroup, this is where I could pick it. I could give it a new name if I didn't want to use the regular resource name. Any notes about authentication, like I could tell my patrons, you must be logged in to see this, and please use your law school login or whatever that, things like that, and we'll just save that. And now this material, this resource, Westlaw Law School, this collection is only accessible to the supergroup, people who are part of the law library or part of this health library that I set it up. And that's it, that's done. Save it, and this collection has been isolated, so to speak, for my supergroup. All right, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint presentation and move on to the last of these big, this kind of catch-all group of configuration options. Two more things that I want to show you here: overlap analysis and then community zone updates. Again, questions as we go along, please keep throwing them into the chat. I see that they're going in there. I've just got a short bit of time left and I want to make sure to cover this as I can, but we will try to answer these questions later and publish them in a place that you all can see them. So, overlap analysis. Again, this is the step-by-step. I will just do this in Alma for you, but let me just explain what overlap analysis is. Again, it's when you're comparing two different collections or multiple collections to see, do they have the same portfolio? Really, do have the same title? Because if you're paying for it twice, that's kind of a waste of money. Sometimes that happens because one collection has titles you need, another collection has some of the same titles, but a lot of different titles. But it's still nice to know if you have some overlap, and if there's a significant overlap, especially if the only titles that you really wanted out of a collection are the ones that are overlapped, well, then you don't need to keep paying for that collection. So let's switch over to Alma, go back to the home page of Alma, and take a look at how to start an overlap and collection analysis. So from the menu, we go to the Resources tab here, and down in Advanced Tools is Overlap and Collection Analysis. Looks like we have run this report a few times in the past, but I want to submit a new report right here. We have a couple ways of doing analysis. We can compare two sets, meaning a set from one collection and a set from another collection, or I could do it by selected titles, where I manually go through and I say I have this title, this group of titles, where is it located, which collections is it located in. I'm going to leave it at the comparison of two sets and go on to the next page of this wizard, and we need to add the source collection and the target collection. So the source collection is the one that we want to compare with. We're comparing it to the target. You'll notice that in this target collection, we can compare with another collection in our institution zone, or we can compare with the records in a community zone, that community zone collection that maybe we don't own yet. We're considering. So it depends how you kind of want to do this. You could look at it. In fact, I'll show you this example. Let me just add a source electronic collection. This is the one that I want, that we own, or we're paying for, and we want to compare with West Law School again. Just because I'm uncreative this morning, I want to use the same one. And in this case, I need to select the box for Westlaw Law School and add selected to my list, and then I'm done. So it takes a couple extra steps. Now I've got this initial collection in the top for my first comparison, the source comparison. Now I'm going to add it to a target electronic collection. So again, I could check it with another collection I already subscribed to that's in my institution zone, and just set it up just the way I did the Westlaw Law School. In this case, I'm actually considering subscribing to a new collection that I don't currently subscribe to, but it is in the community zone. Other folks have, the bibliographic records are stored in the community zone, and so I can make a real comparison, and I can say, oh, there's so much overlap, I don't need to buy that one. Or, oh, the overlap is in a few records, but it's got some key other portfolios that I really want, so it's worth purchasing. So I'm going to select the target electronic collections from the community zone, and I'm going to go in and find, it's actually also from Westlaw. It's Westlaw Next. They have another collection that I was interested in comparing to. I'm just going to scroll till I find the one I want. I want news and business. Oh yeah, this one right here. And check the box and add selected and click done. I have to do all those steps. So here is this new collection. We don't own it. We don't subscribe to it. But it is, the titles are listed in the community zone collection. So now I'm going to run the collection. I'm going to run the analysis. I'm going to click next on this. Here I need to write down how I'm doing this comparison. First, I want to give it a name that helps me out a little more. So I'm just going to call it the knowledge days law, Westlaw overlap analysis. And it's got the date. And I could even put a description so that other people coming on this collection, my coworkers, would know what I'm doing here. What is my match method? How am I going to compare my current collection with the one that the community zone one? ISSN is just fine, but I could also use title match if I knew that would be better for other reasons. These other choices, as you can see. Do I want to use date coverage information in the comparison? Do I want to see, maybe it does have the same title, but the date ranges are different, which would be worth keeping for various reasons. In addition, I can check the reference year for the current year, or I could use for the embargo if I had this date collection. Would give me the options of changing the year, but I actually didn't want to do that for this example for you folks. So I turn that off and I submit the job, and it will start doing this run. I haven't done this comparison recently. I suspect it's going to take a while because we're talking about tens of thousands of different titles that need to be checked. So for you folks, I'm just going to show you one that was run a couple months earlier just so we could see what kind of things we got. Here's a set comparison, which is the same way we did it. And we can just kind of take a look at this analysis. And it's just, these are reports. These are downloadable reports that, in this case, it's various XML files or things like that, what we could take a look at. I won't drag it out here for you folks, but this is the way we would check the overlap analysis reports. Again, I'm moving pretty fast because I wanted to finish up here and not keep you folks late. But if you have any questions about how to look at these reports or anything like that, the documentation right up here in the help file, help for this page, if you click on that, it's going to launch you over to our documentation specifically about this page. And so you can get some guidance on how to read an analytics report on overlap. The last thing I want to cover today is community zone updates. If you have resources in your institution zone that are linked to the bibliographic records of the community zone, then when we update the community zone, we at Ex Libris update the community zone records, we let you know what has been changed. And the place you would find that is in the resources menu in the community zone updates. All right, oops, right down here. Community zone updates task list. So this is a task list. It is something for someone in your institution to work on, to go through the list of things that have been changed. What I've found when I was preparing for today's session was that our little test institution here hasn't had community zone changes in a while. So if I check the date range, I'm actually going to check the date range of the last 7 days, which might be a reasonable thing for you all to check. Turns out nothing has changed, at least as far as my institution, in the last 7 days. I had to go back a ways to find anything that needs to be changed at all, but you probably check a more reasonable date range. But I have to pick the last time some significant changes were made, which was back in March. Here is a list of 1,289 changes that were made in the community zone that affected resources that I subscribe to, or we subscribe to at our imaginary Alma University institution here. Some of these changes are things like an entire collection got deleted. Looks like we have several of those. Some of these changes are things like the portfolio coverage was updated on a particular portfolio within a particular collection. There's a whole list off the top here I can show you of the kinds of things that could be changed. A base URL got updated. A bibliographic record got updated. And we want to just, the community zone updates, we as an institution, then you as an institution, you may need to change something. You may need to do something about it. And so we just want to provide this list for you at any time that you can make so you can make whatever changes you need to. Once you go in and make the changes in your system, then back here on this task list, you might say, I can dismiss the ones here that I have checked because I've gone through and done whatever I need to do, and I can remove these two from the task list. We've already, we've done those, and we can keep working on the other 1,287 changes that were made. Or you could look through it, where your workflow, however you folks do it at your institution, and you can just dismiss all of the updates that have happened in the past and start fresh the next time the community zone is updated. And that's what I wanted to show you for everything today. The community zone updates and the other stuff that we've talked about. So let me just wrap up real quick here with some extra information for you. I've been talking about a documentation because it's so vital. It's so much more detailed. It explains everything that I can't explain here. If you try to click on these links right now here in the presentation, they won't work. I could do it, but if you want to get this PowerPoint up on the Knowledge Center and download it and run through the PowerPoint and see some of the things that we've talked about and take your time instead of the rush that I had to do, take a look at these two places in the documentation: managing electronic resources and scenarios and workflows in this documentation section. Great ways of learning all the details about this. In addition, we have a couple extra things just for helpful things. If you have some ideas for ways of improving Alma, we have the Idea Exchange. We have the Developer Network for those of you who like to dig into APIs and things like that. And then all of these webinar presentations that we're going through for our Knowledge Days online are at this link right here, which is the cross-product section of the Ex Libris Knowledge Center. So I'm going to stay online for a few more minutes. If you do have any questions that didn't get answered through here, toss them in there and we'll figure out how to get those taken care of if we can. I've run up all the way to the top of the hour, and so I need to get out of here. But if you have a few minutes, as soon as you close this WebEx, you'll hear a survey pop up in your internet browser. I would really appreciate if you would take just a couple of minutes to fill out the survey. Now, this is what I do. I teach, I give presentations. I would love to have your feedback, positive or negative, about how this went for you. We as an institution, as a group, would love to know if this worked for you, and we're so glad that you were able to come. So thank you very much for being here, and have a great day.
Just a heads up to everybody that we will try to put together a document where we respond to the questions that we are able to. And we'll put that over there in the same place where you can find the presentation right now. And I've just posted that link again in the chat. So thank you all for attending. Kevin, thank you for this excellent session. And thank you all for being such an active and engaged audience. We are looking forward to reviewing all the questions that came in. Thank you.